Operation Friends was an effort by U.S. armed forces to provide humanitarian assistance by supporting Japan in disaster relief beginning on March 12, 2011. It involved 24,000 U.S. service members, 189 aircraft, 24 naval ships, and an estimated $90 million. You didn't see other governments coming to the aid like the U.S., excluding the $4.3 billion cost incurred by the construction of the USS Ronald Reagan that's now been radiated. And here's the headline. You've got to go to RT to even know about this. It's up on Infowars.com. U.S. Navy sailors sue Japan for lying about Fukushima radiation. And it has now come out that they were testing them, and as the levels went up, they stopped the testing. And, of course, this has come out in the Japanese news that they lied to the whole world and would just say that detectors weren't working in Fukushima prefecture or that state and surrounding areas. And now they've been doing the same thing here in the United States with increased radiation levels. We sent our reporters out for a week on the West Coast, finding as high as 14 times and 10 times and 7 times and 9 times, all up and down the southern, central, and northern coast of California and Oregon. That is big news. And the news admitted we were right, but said, you know, it was still a conspiracy theory to think it was bad. So the radiation's up, but they're not going to discuss why. And a lot of it's toxic waste dumping over the years. The Navy did, and it's Fukushima. In fact, will you guys print me this? It was a study out from marine biologists last week that the seals are dying on the West Coast in Alaska from the radiation. And they've been testing them because it bioaccumulates the fish they eat. It builds up. This is a very, very serious situation. Here it is. University of Alaska scientists, Fukushima radiation may be making Alaskan seals sick with huge bloody rot holes in them and radiation sickness evidence. So we're like seals, folks. Things bioaccumulate in us. We're at the top of the food chain. And we're joined until the bottom of the hour by Attorney Paul Garner and Lieutenant Steve Simmons, who was out on one of those ships that gave aid when everybody else ran. And so they can also break down what he saw, what unfolded. But this is a big deal because just like the deadly dust on 9/11, which we know they knew about, they lied and said it was safe to breathe. I know a lot of firefighters and police I've spoken with in New York it benefits for who are now dead. And it took them 9 years to finally get some coverage, medical coverage. This is how evil the government is. The New York Post called them ambulance chasers. I mean, I've been there when the cops and firemen are literally coughing blood up and are on oxygen machines and can't even go on stage turning blue. And then they die. And they're, oh, well, we only say cops and firemen are heroes when the government wants to use them for some event, or Navy sailors or Marines or Army. But when it comes to actually backing them up, we call them ambulance chasers. So we're joined by Paul Garner, the attorney, and Lieutenant Steve Simmons from the Navy. Gentlemen, you've got the floor. Tell us what you witnessed when you were there, Lieutenant Simmons, and what's unfolded now and what's happened to the 71, at least 71 sailors, many of them in their 20s, reporting radiation sickness, filing suit against Tokyo Electric. Tell us what's going on.
Well, first, thank you for having me on the show. You know, it's tragic, actually, of what's been going on with everybody who is now suffering.
Is this Steve? Is this Steve or is this Paul?
This is Steve.
Okay, so this is the Navy man. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Paul, this is Paul, and I'm sorry to interrupt Steve and your question, but I just want to say to you, Alex Jones, that you are a true Tomodachi to our first responders and all 70,000 participants in Operation Tomodachi. Thank you for bringing awareness to this situation to your listeners. I hope it stays on the front burner. Go on, Steve. I just want to add something. I listened to what you said before. You might want to check out a paper that was written almost a year ago, came out of Honolulu, Hawaii, University of Hawaii, Evaluation of Radiation Doses and Associated Risk from the Fukushima Nuclear Accident to Marine Biota and human consumers of seafood. And this is by Nicholas Fisher, Browleen Seiler. I'll send you the link. But this is of grave concern and should be to every inhabitant.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's why we've got you on, and I'm no hero doing this. You're just doing your duty as well. If they don't care about sailors, Counselor, they don't care about anybody. I mean, we've got to start worrying about these reactors.
Yeah, and Alex, for God's sakes, send the ambulance at least, and we'll chase after the ambulance, you know what I mean? But they didn't even send the ambulance to help these poor people, these victims, and they instead, the DOD just canceled the Tomodachi registry. It'll be a year this February 1st that they decided to throw in the towel on that, claiming that it's all low dose, and I'll speak with you further about that later, but I really want you to hear from Steve, okay?
Absolutely. Tell us what you witnessed, what you did in the operation trying to help the Japanese.
Well, you know, everybody's job was different as far as who did what, who worked where. You know, my position while I was out there, I was actually an administrative officer for the air wing, the carrier air wing that was embarked on the Reagan for that particular deployment. So it was a scheduled deployment. We were already out on deployment, and we were actually heading to participate in an exercise, and we actually got diverted from the exercise, got diverted up north to go participate and, of course, help out the citizens of Japan following that 9.0 earthquake and tsunami that ravaged their shore. So
you were there super early. How long after Fukushima reactors blew up a few days into it, were you on site?
The earthquake and tsunami hit if I remember correctly, on the 11th of March, and if I remember right, we arrived on the 12th of March.
Wow, and because the reactors didn't go right away. That is simply amazing.
It went 5 hours. Forgive me for interrupting, but former Prime Minister Naoto Kan revealed to the Japanese Foreign Press Corps that the meltdown of reactor number 1 occurred 5 hours after the earthquake. He measured it from the earthquake at 2:46 p.m. local time.
Yes.
And the tsunami happened about 45 minutes later. But they knew that they were in a loca. They knew that they had loss of coolant. They knew that they were heading to a meltdown, and they had a meltdown 5 hours later before these first responders showed on the scene.
And then it kept going on for days, and then the big Mach 3 blew up. That was the one that shot the mushroom cloud in the air so far. Amazing.
Yeah, and they were cooked for 5 hours in what is claimed by those in charge as being low dose, and you can get as much by eating a banana or from just taking a plane ride or something.
That's right. Tell us the long and short of it. I mean, you guys, these sailors, everybody tried to help with Fukushima. You got radiated, and the big crux here, as I was reading the news, is that then your radiation levels were going up, so they stopped testing you. Tell folks what happened.
Well, the story that they've been peddling, or that's been peddled for the past 3 years, is that there is no threat to the radiation levels that anybody was exposed to, and that you can actually get more radiation exposure from 1 month's worth of rock, sun, and soil, or a transcontinental flight. So that now today, it doesn't sit well. I can say, at least for me, it doesn't sit well. It's not that easy to push that I believe button because of some of the measures that were taken while the ship was out there.
Sure. I mean, well, they admit this is much worse than Chernobyl, and it's ongoing. So what did you do in the mission? How close did you get? And then when did you guys start to feel sick?
Well, if I remember correctly, I wasn't, my job, I'm not a navigator or anything like that. All I can go is, what we were told. So at one point we were within pretty close proximity to the plant, and as Paul mentioned, sitting for 5 hours, we actually sailed into the nuclear plume and was in the plume for a little over 5 hours. And then on a subsequent time, we actually had to secure the water system because we actually sucked up the contaminants into the water system of the ship. And everybody who knows something about the ship, that's how we get our drinkable water, our potable water. So everything we use, from showers, water faucets, soda machines, water for cooking, it's all coming from seawater.
And what is the point in your missions of sailing through the plume?
That's a very valid question. That's definitely a question that I don't have an answer to. I'm not... Sure.
And so you guys are saying you've got radiation sickness. When did you start to see the symptoms?
Well, it was November of 2011 after I had returned. Apparently I was having some issues on the ship, and I really didn't think much about it as far as GI-type issues, and I didn't really think anything about it. November of 2011, I started feeling ill, at which time I was actually driving into Arlington, heading to work. I was driving down Route 50, and I actually blacked out and drove my truck up on a curb. So after that, it was back and forth to the doctor, test after test, couldn't figure anything out. Started running fevers. I was running fevers for 3 months solid, as high as 102.9, in and out of the hospital 3 different times for admittance into the hospital. Lymph nodes start swelling, dealing with severe night sweats, lost 20 to 25 pounds completely unexpectedly, wiping hair off my body as I showered. And then during the second hospitalization, I was actually standing up and my legs just buckled. And then from there it started dealing with muscle weakness, progressing up. And now it's taken a point where it now affects the signals between the brain and the bladder, and I have to catheterize every 4 hours now.
Good Lord. Classic radiation.
Wheelchair dependent.
Classic radiation sickness symptoms. And, of course, Japanese children are dropping dead everywhere. People are having heart failure. Their teeth are falling out. Same type stuff you've been going through with the bleeding and the not having control of the bladder. And, of course, the response is that nothing's going on, correct?
As of right now, there's been no doctors able to, well, I don't want to say able to, but at least willing to make the connection. In fact, I've actually had, the first time I was hospitalized, I actually brought it up to the intern, and the intern's response to me was, well, if this was radiation, you would have seen symptoms long before this. My response back to him was, I'm no doctor, but you need to go back to med school because you're an idiot.
Well, let's talk to your lawyer, Paul Garner, real quick. I do see that Congress, the Navy Times is reporting, is investigating sailors' exposure to Fukushima radiation. But, I mean, my whole point is anybody in the military, or the police for that matter, should understand that when stuff melts down, out of hand, almost every time, they deny people were exposed, just like the nerve gas in the first Gulf War. 24,000 chemical detectors went off, and they still just said, no, nothing happened, even though it killed large numbers of people years later, and has now been confirmed. Talking to your attorney, Paul Garner, why do you think they have this attitude? I mean, clearly your client and others on the ship and ships are showing classic forms of radiation sickness. What's been the train of events the last 3 years?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
They control the ball game. They control the media. They control the misinformation that's disseminated from day one, from Fukushima Gate. If you were at the nuclear power plant on day one, March 11th, 2011, and you were in charge of the power plants and having to deal with the meltdown of reactor number 1, number 2, number 3, and the potential to have to say, hey, we have to walk away from this because you'll have to evacuate Tokyo, Japan. So here's the dynamic. The guy who was in charge is now dead from cancer, their own guy. So I don't care what Nuke Abe, their present prime minister, may be pushing to the world. No one has gotten sick from Fukushima. No one ever will. Well, just take a look at the guy who was in charge of, your Tepco, your Tokyo Electric Power Company. You're a big shareholder. You're number 1 shareholder in it now. The guy's dead from cancer. Hello? So they're in control, Alex. They don't have we don't have InfoWars at our disposal on mass media. If mass media paid attention to this like I did after it first happened and stayed on it like they should have, but they're captured. They're all captured by the nuclear industry from the top down, from your commander-in-chief right on through to the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's all money-making.
That's right.
charade.
That's right. Their propaganda is so good. Of course, the Ronald Reagan's nuclear-powered, last time I checked. And, you know, I've always been a pro-nuclear power guy because, I mean, I believe we need energy. The problem is none of them work these things right. They build them on fault lines. When they blow up, they don't even seem to care. They're not even trying to fix it. There's just this attitude that they're in control of the BS machine so they can lie to themselves and everybody else, but they're not in control of the reactors. You know, the laws of physics will not respond to Tepco's bull. So where is the lawsuit going, and how do we support you guys?
Okay, here's where it's going. We're refiling before February 6th is the deadline that Judge Janice Sammartino afforded us to file our second amended complaint in federal court in San Diego. We had 51 victims. We expect to double that figure of record. And we've been contacted by probably 250,000, 250. 250 victims, but there were, as you mentioned at the top of the program, thousands involved in this. Now, there's a latency period, as we know, but we have filed on behalf of all John and Jane Does who participated in Operation Tomodachi to preserve their rights so that they can file a claim in the future when something arises. With Steve, we know what's happened. With several others, unfortunately, it's the same scenario or beyond. Constantly bleeding from your butt or from gynecologically, and you're a young person, and not at 21 you lose one of your testicles. So we're going to push this forward. As you mentioned, Congress is going to get a report back from the Undersecretary of State in charge of this by April 15th, but we're not waiting for them because where have they been?
And by the way, folks, for those that don't know, radiation attacks fast-growing cells. So your gums, your intestinal lining, and sailors across the board that were part of the operation have been reporting bleeding from their rear ends. So just understand, this is not a game. That means you've got serious radiation sickness. And what makes me mad is they didn't tell people take iodine from what I read. Perhaps the sailor can correct me. But why not tell them to take iodine? Why not tell them now that there's things like Prussian blue and things that could help strip this out of your body, or chelation? I mean, why were you told any of this, Lieutenant Simmons?
They don't want to admit that there's a problem. It's denial. It's denial.
No, it's like telling the first responders don't wear respirators. The air is fine on World Trade Center. I mean, it's beyond just not caring and covering up. They actively don't want you to get any aid or protect yourself. They'd be saying, go down 1,000 feet in the water. You don't need a mask or a tank. You don't need air down there. I mean, it's just... Go back to that briefly. So they never told you to protect yourself from radiation.
You had a wonderful...
Well, they also...
I'm sorry, Steve. I just want to say this to Alex. Glenn Troltz, your guy who you had on the other day, Glenn Troltz, who got measured for cesium. He's got cesium in his body. How much cesium do you think Steve Simmons has in his body?
Well, you must be a listener. Yeah, we had one of our crew on who had his blood tested because he moved from California because he was sick. He had very high levels of cesium that they said was from Fukushima in the major medical report from a major medical lab in Chicago where his blood was sent. And exactly, we need to get the test of your whole crew. It's just amazing. So to be clear, Lieutenant Steve Simmons, who was on the Ronald Reagan aiding through the plume right there at Fukushima, you guys you were miles away and responded when the tsunami hit and then came in. Tell us about, I was reading that you guys were told that there was increased radiation, but then when it started going up and up and up, they said don't worry about it and stop testing?
Honestly, that's new information to me. That is not information that I was purview to, I should say.
Sure. What about iodine? Did they tell you to take potassium iodine?
the only individuals that were taken up for testing iodine were those directly involved with flight ops, those going ashore, and potentially some of those that were working on the deck, but that was it. The rest of the crew, nothing. So you're talking a crew of about 5,500 people, and a small amount of them were working on the deck or actually going ashore.
And by the way, you're living in and around a nuclear reactor on the ship, because that's a nuclear-powered carrier, right?
Correct.
Okay, so did they not have enough potassium iodate or iodine for you, or what happened?
I'm quite sure they had plenty. However, they're going off of misinformation being fed to them from Japan and from Tokyo Electric.
Introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. Get your Pro Pure with the new Pro One filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139. We have a lot of nuclear and atomic disasters going on. Radiation is really, really bad news. We've got a bunch of aging 35, 40-year-old reactors that are supposed to be shut down. And I feel pretty stupid that, if you go back 15 years ago, I was pro-nuclear power on air. Because if they actually ran them correctly and actually warned people when there were occasional problems, you could argue if we ran out of fossil fuels, what are we going to do? Freeze to death in the winter? It's a very powerful form of energy. The problem is that, look, if there's a disaster, and I've interviewed Don Darling, the head of Veterans for Peace here in town, himself a famous Navy captain and was a captain of submarines, nuclear rescue teams, you name it, nuclear submarines. And he's radiated. He's had all this happen to him. I haven't talked to Don in years. We ought to get a hold of him and see how he's doing. So he was real sick when I talked to him on air a few years ago. And they ordered them to turn a reactor off and turn it on. They said, well, and they were all engineers. He was an engineer. And they said, we're not supposed to do that. It's going to radiate us. And they said, that's an order, Captain. So they turned it off and then turned it back on and released a bunch of radiation, just literally to test it on the submarine. And Don's told that story on air before. So it's this attitude of the bosses up on top that see sailors and Marines and Army people as animals. And the giant history of secret testing. I remember being a child watching some documentary film. I forget what it was. It was at the movie theater with my dad, and it was about atomic soldiers, or part of it was. And it showed them having the soldiers sit back a mile away from an atomic blast and then march into the glowing crater. And it was a death sentence for them. It took them decades to die, but it killed them. A lot of them had their teeth and stuff fall out, right away, and blood come out of their orifices, and had deformed kids and the rest of it. And I said, Dad, why is that? He said, I asked people when I was working at MD Anderson why they did, not at MD Anderson, but so many other places the government did that. And he said, because humans are cheaper than monkeys. He said, why don't we just use monkeys? And they said, well, humans are cheaper than monkeys. So that's the attitude. And look, I don't want to do testing on monkeys either. I have empathy. What you'll do to a little animal, you do to somebody else. But it's like everybody cares about the animals, but not the people. And it's just another story. Oh, the sailors got radiated and they're bleeding out their hind ends, and their teeth are falling out and their hair is falling out. And yeah, there's 14-fold radiation increase in San Francisco on the beach. I mean, big deal. Let's not even investigate that. And there's this attitude that you've got like 3 heads or something if you care. So I care about this because it shows the mindset of the establishment. It shows that that the sky's the limit more and more, and they've got these pilots, people on the flight deck. I mean, this is coming out in the news, and no one will give them treatment. No one will pay for it. At least the New York Post, who I was critical of earlier, they reported on this. Guys, closing comments, Attorney Paul Garner and Lieutenant Steve Simmons. I mean, how's your radiation sickness now? Has it gotten better or worse? You got to catheterize yourself. What's happening to your buddies? How many people have joined the suit?
Well, for me, the latest thing, obviously, is now that I have to catheterize every 4 hours.
Good God.
I'm also 100% wheelchair dependent.
Good God.
I've lost my mobility there, and it's just I take one day at a time. And up until recently, I really haven't talked to anybody else who has been dealing with any sort of ailment, at least where I'm located. There's one individual that I've come across who's also dealing with some issues of his own as well. And then, of course, there are the other individuals, all the other individuals that have come forward to Paul.
Yeah, well, RT reports 71 sailors, many in their 20s, are filing in the lawsuit that your lawyer's heading up. Is that correct, Paul?
More. Hello?
Yes, sir. I'm just thinking about this situation. Any other points?
The situation is this. We've barely scratched the tip of the iceberg. You're so right in your analysis. They sent the Reagan up to Bremerton for a year and a half to try to take out the radiation from a lot of components. They shipped it all over to Hanford to bury it over there. They sent the Reagan back to Coronado. Then when somebody says, hey, you shouldn't have little school kids going on for field trips on the Reagan, there's probably radiation on it, they determine, oh, we'll send it back to Japan and we can cook it some more. So what I would suggest to you is this. Have your listeners consider a study that was done back in 2003. Past exposure to densely ionizing radiation leaves a unique permanent signature in the genome. And that was David J. Brenner you probably know him, out of Columbia University.
Yes.
The Center for Radiological Research. They teamed up with the Russians, and they studied all the people from Chernobyl, and they actually isolate down to the chromosome level what damage was done by radiation as opposed to other environmental hazards that we all confront. So this is going to burst their Fukushima gate balloon, because once the people in the know step forward and say, no, enough of this BS, this causes unique permanent damage to our genomes. We're talking about survival as a race. Okay? We're talking about survival of the west coast of California and beyond. Just wait until the people up in Malibu have all that radioactive debris land on their shores this year, and the phones ring off the hook at Barbara Boxer's office and congressmen down here and everyone, oh, what are you going to do about this now? Well,
it really worries me that the establishment could care less about anything but partying all the time with their underage pages. I mean, it is frightening to know the type of weapons these people have, because the honorable folks are the low-level military and police and the general public compared to the people running things. I guess historically we've got a bunch of Caligulas and Neros and on power trips. I empathize with what's going on with you, Lieutenant Steve Simmons, and I hope you get better. I mean, has the VA told you about any treatments that can try to get the radioactive isotopes out of your body, or have those already broken down? I mean, what's your prognosis?
Game. That's what they are, and they got to be compensated. Let me just tell you this, okay, and I'll shut up. Mangano and Sherman, Doctors Joe Mangano, the Nuclear Project, and Jeanette Sherman underscore how small amounts of anthropogenic radiation are lethal and crippling over the short and intermediate term. Human immune systems cannot thrive with permanently damaged thyroid function. You take it from here, Tomodachi.
Well, that's well said. Go ahead.
answer your question, has the VA mentioned anything about it? In fact, nobody has. Nobody's even, due to the fact that nobody's acknowledged that radiation has had anything to do with my failing health, nobody's even talking about potential treatments or anything of that nature. And, in fact, I've actually had, aside from the intern who gave me his comment about if it was radiation, I would have seen symptoms long before I did, I've actually had, no kidding, a doctor say, well, maybe you're better off not knowing what this is. So at what point do I give up all hope with doctors? And I don't know. I don't know where to go from there.
We have a bunch of insane scum running things. Look at the GMO crops. Look at the fluoride in the water. They are killing us, and overwhelmingly it's to reduce population. That's their rationalization. But in the final equation, they're just a bunch of mismanaging, bumbling boobs who endanger our entire civilization. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on with us. I want to ask your lawyer, Paul Garner, if he'd like to give out his legal website, or Steve, if you'd like to give out any contact info for yourself or others that might want to talk to you.
Sure. We would invite your listeners or others to contact us at FukushimaRadiationVictims.net. It's spelled FukushimAradiationVictims.net, and we'll be happy to interact with you. And my personal email is pcg@garnerlaw.com.
All right, well, good job.
NERLAW.com.
Good job, Mr.
Anyway,
Garner.
Thank you, Alex, for shining a spotlight on this, and we'll keep you posted. And I know that I've reached out to Glenn. I want to speak with him about where he was during the 3 years before he got tested, where he lived and where.
Sure, thank you. We'll do that. And then Steve Simmons, anything else?
Nope. I mean, obviously my big concern is that making sure that answers come and that the young sailors and Marines are all taken care of.
I hear you. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Godspeed. We'll continue to follow your case because we're all being affected by this in a lesser way, unfortunately. I wish none of us were being affected by it, including yourself. It's my cousin was born with holes in his heart right after my uncle got back from Vietnam. He got married, had a child, and the child died when he was about 1.5 years old. His name was Flint. And they told him that it was Agent Orange. And then, of course, he had a bunch of other children that were fine after that because they say it precipitates out and affects you for a few years. And, of course, that's on record, but they tried to cover that up for decades. And then, of course, when they looked at my uncle's heart and lungs and stuff, he had a lesion on his heart and things from a heart attack. And they said, we see these, or it's like heart attack-like, in pilots from Vietnam who got a lot of Agent Orange on them. We see this in guys that are even really healthy like him. And that's just an example of how I've had 2 people in my family die or be contributed to Monsanto, which owned the Agent Orange. I mean, it's just like you people never stop. I mean, you're assaulting us, but it's done with stuff that kills us decades later, or we have a deformed kid. It's like Fallujah and the Marines have a 5-fold increase in deformed babies. They have a 14 to 18-fold, depending on the year, increase for the Iraqis in Fallujah, a 4-fold increase across Iraq. Belgrade has a 4-fold increase where the U.S. and NATO use DU on civilian targets. I mean, it's crazy. It's like it's space aliens really run the government, and they want to live in a radioactive environment or something. I mean, you try to think of logic. I don't really believe that. I'm saying hypothetically as a way to understand it. I want to believe there's some reason. No, the establishment just doesn't care. While they lecture us all day long about how we got to get rid of our cars because they're going to hurt the earth, and we've got to pay a carbon tax, and we've got to restrict this and restrict that, and oh, you can't wash your car in your own yard because the soap runoff will hurt the... They are obsessed with everything they can tax us on and track us on, but all the real stuff, they're doing it on purpose. They're doing it on purpose, on record. Monsanto, all the big GMO companies, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being assaulted by you people. I'm tired of it. And exactly what that lawyer is a good lawyer. All the studies he was mentioning, we've covered. The Pentagon, MIT, all of them, they all know. They wouldn't let them use DU until 1990. They had it in the 50s, stockpiled in Eastern Europe, Western Europe border, in case the 10-to-1 superiority tanks of the Russians came in. They were then going to serve up, once a nuclear war already started, DU as a secret weapon to be fired from high-caliber rifles and small anti-tank artillery that three-man teams could carry and assemble to take out the tanks. But it was only to be used in just a red-level nuclear war emergency. 10-to-1. Now, the establishment said in 1990, use it. Again, it isn't just about the poisoning. It's about why is the establishment doing this? I mean, look at Steve Jobs, you know, dying young. Look at all this. This is not good. By the way, I'm going to do a plug here and then come back and cover the move to ban cars, have major cities car-free. MSNBC is reporting it like it's wonderful. Edward Snowden tells German TV that NSA is involved in industrial espionage. Ever heard that before? 16 years ago here, I was told by an NSA whistleblower, by another NSA whistleblower, and by at least 3 telecom whistleblowers. Because as more and more of them came to me, I got more and more. And they were smart. Rodeos, car shows. I did a remote at a golf course, and a guy showed up and gave me info. And, I mean, these were all like engineers with the pocket protectors, but good engineers, high-level engineers, you know, getting into their Mercedes and Cadillacs and driving off. And they all told me the same thing. They said it's economic data to predict the future and control the world. And I've been saying that for 16 years. People think I'm crazy. Now it's all being announced. This is a big deal, folks. You can end free will if you can predict the future, because then you can put stimuli in to manipulate, and it gives you a targeting system on the mind with your stimuli to learn how to guide the brain. It's mind control. So don't be mad at the public that are mind control. Listen, if you're in the Navy or if you were around Fukushima or you're on the West Coast, you're insane if you're not getting the gourmet salts that have the good iodine in them. But that is bound iodine and is still not the proprietary nation iodine that we sell. And we sell stuff that we use. I discovered this doing research for myself and my family. And I tried a bunch of them and couldn't take them. It gave me stomach aches. I found this brand that no one even knew about, 20-something years, proprietary, National Academy of Sciences, and basically bought them out. Or we're the distributor of it. And it is half the price, double the strength of many leading competitors. It's Survival Shield. We did get a lot more of it in, but quite frankly, it's a small laboratory, and it's completely organic. The corn-based glycerin out of Germany, very hard to get organic corn, but it is amazing. And when you purchase it, it helps fund our operation, InfoWarsLife.com. We've got discounts when you order in bulk. And, of course, it stores well, so you can save it. Visit InfoWars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.